In my last video, we got set up with a very simple collision that falls around our player, as well as a headset that moves around and actually tracks with our headset. Now, obviously, we didn't do it in the simplest way possible. The way that I did it actually allowed for us to have collision that fall around our player so we can collide with things like the environment and other things in it. In this video, I want to take that a step further and I want to start implementing things like movement and rotation into our player, so that way we can actually get something going with our player and we can move into interacting with other objects in our environment. With that, let's go and jump right in the video and I'll show you exactly how we get all that done. Now, before we actually get started with actually implementing all of our movement and all of that stuff, which is all going to be very easy, I want to real quick take a step back and talk about some of the things I did between last video and this video. There are only two quick things that I did differently between in order to prep for this video. First off, you can see we now have the overlay working on static meshes. So if I actually go on over here to overlay, I can take that off and you can see that that disappears. That was just a little sample mesh I put together. Now, in case you're curious as to how I did that, overlay materials do not work with nanite meshes. So I just went into project settings and I disabled nanite. That's all you need to do in order to actually get this going. The one little annoyance is that now I have this little error that kind of stays there at all times. If anybody happens to know how to get rid of that, I would love to know that, because I see that in a lot of my projects because I use that overlay material a lot. The other quick change that I did was actually to our player. Now, our player, if we come on over here, you might remember in our position hand function, I actually set everything based off of the world location. Now, this does work. There's really not a lot of issues to this. But one of the things that occurred to me between last video and this video is that this might make it a little bit more difficult to do things like rotating our player through snap and smooth rotation. So what I've actually done is I've ended up swapping out our world location to our relative location, and I've ended up swapping that out over here as well, so you can now see that we're all dealing with the relative location. And the reason for this, I'm gonna go and remove those. The reason for this is, rather than trying to figure out the new position of where our motion controller root should be in the world, we can just rotate our whole player. And because this and our camera, let me go and open up our camera and everything. Well, that's not the camera. There it is. Because everything is being handled in relative location, we can just rotate our player in world location and not have to worry about having to change really anything about this. I was going to do things a little differently here, but I think this is just going to be a much simpler way of doing things. And so we're just going to keep everything relative and just go on from there. I'll go and remove that. That was from a little experiment I was doing. Perfect. All right. So, since we have all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into moving and rotating our player. Now, we're going to start with rotation because I think this is going to be the easiest thing. Rotate player. So I did make one called rotating. Okay. So I'm actually going to change this into a different category, and we're going to call this movement. So we're going to create a couple different things here, a couple different functions real quick before we get on to this. I don't know if I'll have enough time to get into all three that I want to do, but I at the very least want to get into two. So the two that I really want to get into is RotatePlayer and MovePlayer. Perfect. And then the last one that I want to do is, let's go and add one on, is TeleportPlayer. Just like that. Perfect. Actually, we should have enough time to do TeleportPlayer as well. I don't know that I'll have enough time to implement it so we can actually test it, but I should have enough time to actually put it together so we can have everything working just fine. Perfect. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to start with RotatePlayer because this is going to be nice and easy. What we want to do with RotatePlayer is we want to add an input, and we just want to call this rotation amount. Actually, I'm just going to call this angle. We'll call it angle. So if we go ahead, put that right in there, we can add in a float, and then we can add world. Ooh. Actually, I won't do that. I'm just going to grab our capsule and we're just going to add relative rotation. Now this should apply it to the world. This should basically do the same thing as doing world rotation as well if you want to just do that. But this will just make it nice and easy. We want to rotate around the z-axis. The z-axis is going to be our left and right rotation. So if we come right on over here, our z-axis is just going to be this left and right rotation just like that. All right, so that's really it. And this will actually allow for us to do both snap and smooth rotation. The only difference between those two is our snap rotation is going to happen once, and our smooth rotation we'll want to do over time, like over a tick or something like that. So we can add in settings later on so we can choose which one the player wants to do, but this will work for both of them without a problem. Let's go and get rid of that. MovePlayer is also going to be pretty easy. I just want to add a relative location, and we want to do that to our capsule. Perfect. And the way we do this is actually going to be kind of interesting. So in order to move our player, first off, I want to do this as a sweep. That's going to be the first thing I want to do. But next thing I want to do is I want to go over here into our player, and I want to create a new, under blueprint, I want to create a new enumeration. And I want to call this, we'll call it tracking source. I think that should work just fine. Okay. Actually, let's first open this. Now, tracking source, this enumerator, I want to give it 3 values. The first one I'm going to call HMD. We can also call this like VR headset or whatever you want to call it. The other 2 I want to call it our left position and right. Actually, not left position, right hand and left hand. I got a little confused there. So using this, what we can do is I'm actually going to create one more function, and I want to call this tracking source transform. Okay. Now, tracking source transform, I'm going to make this pure. And in case you're unsure of what pure does, if we drag this in here, pure just means that we don't have an execution node, which is perfectly fine. I don't want an execution node for this. We're not going to need one. What we're going to use tracking source for is, this just gets simplify our code a little bit because we might be using this again later on. I want to add an output, and this is going to be a transform. And I also want to add an input, and I want to have the input be a tracking source. Okay, and I'm actually going to change these names real quick. We'll call this source and transform. Perfect. And then with this source, what we're going to do is we're going to pass this into, I believe we want to do a switch. Nope, not a switch. Not a switch. I want to do, oh, Unreal Engine's getting a little laggy on me, I guess. There we go. I want to do a select. Okay, the return value is going to go into our transform, and our index is going to go into source. And what we're going to do is I'm going to grab our camera, our motion controller left, and our motion controller right. Actually, I'm debating, do I want to do the mesh? Actually, I think, no, I'm going to leave it motion controller left and motion controller right for now. I might come back and change this later on to be the mesh, but I think this will work just fine for now. Perfect. And then using the camera, we want to get world transform. Perfect. And actually, let me look at our MovePlayer real quick. Yeah, we want this to be world position. So world position, there we go. And then motion controller left, we're going to get world position, world location. No, I want world transform. I'm a little all over the place, I guess, today. World transform. There we go. Actually, I'm just going to do this and this. Pass that in there, and we will pass in our motion controller left there, our motion controller right there. Perfect. Just like that. And like I said, I might come back later on. I think I might want to change these actually to static meshes and then add in a socket later on. So that way we can modify that rotation a little bit if we ever want to. But I don't think that's a necessity right now. So I think that'll work just fine. All right. So for here, and the reason we're doing this too is this is going to make it real easy to modify our settings later. We'll be able to have like different settings depending on which tracking source we're using. So our transform, let's go ahead and split this. I'm just going to base it off the HMD for now. I'm not going to worry about which one we're going off of. I'm just going to base it off our HMD. And we want to take our rotation, find, get. Is it going to be get forward? I might have done this a little backwards. I might actually need the source get. Okay. Hold on. Find, look at rotation. Get forward vector. There we go. Okay, that's what I was looking for. That rotation right into the rotation there. And then we actually want to multiply this as well. And actually, I'm going to change this. Actually, let me see. Add actor. I think there's actually add actor world offset. Adds a delta to the location. Yep, of the actor and world space. That's exactly what I want. Perfect. So we want to pass that in there. And what we actually want to multiply this by is we're going to split, not split. We want to change this to a float. And what I actually want to do is add a speed float that'll be right on over here. And I'll actually make this public as well. And I want to set a default value. We'll set it to 5. I think that, actually, no, I'm going to increase this a little bit. Let's do 20. Might be a little too fast, but it'll be nice and simple. Perfect. And I want that to be sweep. That'll allow for us to get constant collision with everything around us. So that should allow for us to move around perfectly fine. Let's close tracking source. Let's close MovePlayer. And now we're going to move on to TeleportPlayer. TeleportPlayer is we're going to need an input for this. And this is going to be a location. Let's go ahead and do vector. Perfect. And our TeleportPlayer, what we want to do with this is we want to take our location and we want to actually teleport so that way we know we're just above ground level. So in order to do this, we will actually, you know what? No, I'm going to do it this way anyways. Let's do a line trace by channel. Actually, we'll do line trace for objects. Perfect. Move that right over there. And our location, you know what? No, we're going to keep this nice and simple actually, because actually I want to create one more function. Actually, I need to go into movement too. I want to create one more function. So actually, we're going to do this a little different. Let's grab our TeleportPlayer, and I want to set actor location. We will put that right over there. And the location, we're going to take our location and we're going to take this, we're going to add, put that right over there, and we want to set that to teleport as well. Split our struct bin. We're going to take our capsule and we're going to get capsule half height. We'll actually do the get scaled capsule half height, and we're going to add that into our Z, and that should teleport us just above our players, just above this location that we want to be at. A little thing that I'm actually going to do as well is I want to, actually no, I'm not going to do that. I think it'll be fine. Perfect. And that will be everything there. Now, one more function I do want to create, and also since I'm remembering this too, I want to put that in positioning. Actually, I'm going to change this to movement. Okay, perfect. Okay, now one last thing I want to do is I want to also add in gravity. Okay, And gravity, first off, we want to make sure that this is running on tick. So I'm actually going to take that, pass that in at the end of our tick function. And in our gravity, all right, so I was thinking this through. I was way overthinking this actually. All this, I'm actually gonna remove. I had to do a little bit of a quick research there. Now, going into our capsule, there's actually a much simpler way of doing gravity that I really should have thought of, and I was really overthinking this. We can go in collision presets. We want changes to block all dynamic, and this is going to be in our capsule. Then in our gravity, we're just going to add actor world offset. Okay. Again, we're still going to keep the gravity constant, and then we'll just do -10. Now doing this, I actually tested this. If we go on over here into our development level, this should hopefully be working at least. We can go and hit simulate and you'll see it'll fall. Ooh. Okay, I did almost forget something. I was worried there for a second. We want to do sweep as well. So if we go and compile and save that, actually move that over, we can go ahead and hit simulate now, and now it will in fact collide with the environment. You do have to make sure that this is set to sweep. If it's not set to sweep, it will not detect that collision with the floor. We want to make sure that it does that. And that should actually make it so we have all of our movement and everything working. Now test this. I know we should be setting up inputs, but I'm going to keep it nice and simple right now. I want to get our, just get these thumbstick values directly. Let me see. I think I can get the thumbstick of our VR headsets. Maybe I cannot. Maybe I will have to. Okay. So then, this in mind, let's go ahead and set up our inputs real quick. I'll just put this in another folder in our player. So we're going to call this inputs. Inputs are fortunately very easy to set up. We're going to come in here, inputs, and we're going to need our input action. And if I recall, thumbstick left. Let me see here. Perfect. And we want to set this to an axis 2D. Go and save that. And actually what I'm going to do, because I have an idea for later on down the line, these later guides, I'm actually going to call this XR underscore thumbstick left. And then we're also going to, I'm just going to duplicate this actually, XR thumbstick right. Perfect. Okay. Now, also in input, we need to come over here, create an input mapping context, and we'll call this in XR mapping context. Go and open this up, and we're going to need two. The first one's going to be our XR thumbstick left. Second one's going to be our XR thumbstick right. And just to keep this simple for right now, I'm only using a Quest 2, so I'm not going to configure all of them just yet. Just want to do thumbstick left 2D axis, and also under Oculus Touch on the right, thumbstick 2D axis there. So you can go and save that. And then I think if I recall, in project settings, go and open this up. Down here under OpenXR, there we go, OpenXR settings. Oh, they must have changed it. Okay. I thought there was something else that had to be done there, but I think that's perfectly fine. And then if we come up here to begin, play, there. Set mapping. I think actually we need to do it in the player controller. So hold on, get player controller. Mapping context, add mapping context, there we go. And this one we're just going to set to XR mapping context. Priority 0, I think that's everything that needs to be done for the mapping. Okay, I think I did do this slightly wrong. I don't know if this will actually make much of a difference, but I think I did do this slightly wrong. We want to get controller, actually. Cast to a player controller, and then get enhanced input local player subsystem. There we go. And that's actually going to go into our target there. I thought for a second they might have changed it, but it used to be that you had to have extra stuff for OpenXR. Hopefully that's not the case, but we will find out. Perfect. So let's grab our XR thumbstick left. Awesome. And then we're also going to want to grab our XR thumbstick right. And then we'll set this up for smooth locomotion and smooth rotation. So let's grab our, let's see here. Let's grab our MovePlayer. We're gonna grab this under triggered. You know what? I think I forgot to actually add our inputs. So let's actually delete that. Split, ooh, not that. Undo that. I don't want a variable for that. Okay, I did kind of screw up our movement. I knew I was doing it a little too easy. Okay, so let's split the struct bin. And then what we want to do is we want to add our inputs. And this actually needs to be a vector 2D. Perfect, just like that. And I'm just gonna bring this along and break this vector 2D here. Okay. And then we want to use this. Ooh, hold on. Let's do recombine, actually. Recombine. Let me see if I can just multiply these together, if this will work. Multiply this by, because I think I can just multiply these two. Perfect. And that'll just kind of fill in the Z, because we actually don't need to modify the Z whatsoever. So I think that should work just fine. We will hopefully find out here in a second. We can put that in there. And then down here, I'm actually going to break this and grab our RotatePlayer. Put that into triggered. And then I'm actually going to take our X and multiply this by another value. Let's multiply it by 5. And that's going to go right in there. Our X is going to be our left and our right, so that should fill everything in just fine. And we'll go and test this and see how this works. All right, so got some good news and some bad news. So rotation is actually working just fine. You can actually see we've got nice smooth rotation, and the controllers are sticking with the player and everything. The problem we're currently running into is actually movement. So the movement was actually done incorrectly. So I'm actually going to backtrack this real quick, and we're going to see how we can redo the movement so it works just a little bit better. And I want to start by actually seeing what our values we're getting are real quick. Actually, all right, so after a little bit of testing, I actually found out that what I did here actually works just fine. The problem is actually here. So with our gravity, we actually have an issue where when we sink down to the ground, right? But because we're scaling our capsule up and down here with our height, every time we stand up from a lower position, our capsule starts sinking further and further into the ground as we move closer and closer to it. And so that collision into the ground, whenever it collides into the ground, this actually will not work. I'm assuming mostly because we're using sweep, and we want to keep sweep running because that'll allow for us to run into the environment. So what I want to do is come on over here. I want to grab our capsule, and I want to grab our on component begin overlap. And real quick, I want to run a test first. So I want to run a test, and I want to see what other actors we run into before we do anything else. And my hope is that this will be overlapping with the ground. so I'm trying to get my left controller connected. It's having a bit of an issue, throwing a bit of a fit. But anyways, so it took me a little bit of trial and error. There we go. But I did get everything working. So let me run you through the changes real quick, and then I'll show you that it's all working just fine. First off, I removed the gravity function. I might give this another shot later on, but I found that was the reason my capsule is actually sinking into the ground. I'm not really sure why. Hopefully it's something I can work on in the future, but just something I decided to leave for now. I did make a few changes to the MovePlayer. I'll show you in a second. And then down here on component hit, I did a few things to make up for the lack of gravity. So down here, I actually just realized this is probably never going to work. It's fine, I'll fix that. But the important part is working. So right now, whenever we hit the floor, we're going to do a line trace for objects below us. And then if we hit something, we're just going to teleport, so that way we are above the last position that we hit. So we're never sinking into the floor. I did realize that this probably doesn't work because this is not triggering unless we hit something. So I am probably going to need to change that later on. Maybe I need to run that on tick or something. But for now, that'll work just fine. Moving into our MovePlayer, I made quite a few changes here. The MovePlayer, for some reason, maybe someone can tell me a better way of doing the math. I apparently was doing the math wrong when I was doing this vector 2D. I thought we could multiply the vector 2D by the speed and the forward vector, and that would work just fine. Apparently it does not. So let me run you through the new math we have here. Taking our input, we actually break our vector 2D, as you can see right here. And then we run two world offsets. The first one is we're taking our world vector and we're multiplying that by our speed multiplied by our y value. So that's going to take our up and down position here. My controller turned off again. That takes our up and down position, multiplies it by the speed, and then the output value we put into here. And that will, we multiply that by our forward vector because that's going to be our forward and back, and we apply that to our world offsets. And then over here, we basically do the same thing, except we multiply it by, we use our right vector, we again multiply it by our speed, and then we multiply it by our x value this time. So it's basically this same stuff, but changed it around so that way it works with the right vector. And we are still doing a sweep over here. Now, something that did occur to me while I was testing this is the y value might actually need to be multiplied by -1 for this to work fine, which isn't a crazy big deal or anything like that. It's a bit of an annoyance, but something that I was running into. Let me go ahead and hit play here. This is going to be a little awkward, I think. I think my controller is dying or something, but we have our rotation working just fine. And then let me see if I can get my controller to turn on long enough so I can test the movement real quick. All right, so my left controller might be dead. It's not charging for some reason, so I've jerry-rigged together just the WASD keys just to show that we have movement working just fine. My W and S are actually backwards right now. And then we have our left and right rotation working, so it's all working perfectly fine, not a problem. And with that, we have some very simple movement that will allow for us to both move around our play space as well as rotate, so that way for players who might be a little bit more restricted in their play space, whether it be by cables or something else, we now know that they're going to be able to move just fine as well. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next reality.